our first Great Big Green Week training of the year. And it's all about giving you guidance and hopefully boosting your confidence when it comes to applying for funding for both Great Big Green Week events, but also just kind of community projects in general. My name's Jazz. I'm the communities manager at the Climate Coalition, and I'm going to be kind of facilitating the session this evening. Also joined by my colleague Mary from the Climate Coalition, who is going to be on hand in the chat if you need anything. So if you have any questions, please do pop them in the chat and Mary will pick up on them. And I'm also joined by four brilliant speakers this evening. I'm going to come on to introduce them in a second. Before we get started, I'm just going to give an overview of the session this evening and run through some quick housekeeping. So to start with, I'm just going to give a very brief introduction to Great Big Green Week. If you are new to Great Big Green Week, it's just to kind of set the scene and give some context. I know a lot of you have been involved in Great Big Green Week before, so it will be a short but sweet introduction and just give you kind of some context to what we're hoping you'll get out of the session this evening. As I mentioned, we'll then move on to three presentations from four different speakers. So I'm joined by Helen from Futureproof Cumbria, Louise from Westmoreland and Furness Council, Biplav from Haringey Council, and Chloe from Kew Gardens, their Grow Wild programme. And they are each going to share kind of some guidance on sourcing funding for community projects, distributing funding, top tips on going through the application process, what makes an application stand out. And they all have kind of different perspectives and different experiences in that community funding space. So we hope it will give you a range of guidance and advice this evening. Then we're going to have a very quick comfort break, just so you can stretch your legs and take a break from staring at a screen for an hour. We'll then have some time to ask all the speakers some questions. So we'll have about 20 minutes for Q&A. And then I'm just going to give a quick roundup of some of the additional support that we are going to provide to help you both identify and apply for funding, but also just generally get involved in Great Big Green Week as well. So very quick introduction to Great Big Green Week. Great Big Green Week is the UK's biggest ever celebration of community action to tackle climate change and protect nature. And every year, we see people coming together to host events and activities in towns and cities and villages all over the country that really celebrate and showcase the community action that is happening all throughout the year to tackle climate change and to stand up for nature. And we see so many different events taking place in communities. We see repair cafes, swap shops, climate fresque workshops, people's assemblies, cycle days, so many different things that really highlight what people are doing locally for climate and nature, and really showcases that there is that public mandate for action from our decision makers and that we need them to step up to kind of that level of ambition and action that we're seeing in local communities. So just a bit of background, the first Great Big Green Week took place in September 2021, and it was the largest event for climate and nature ever seen in the UK, with over 5,000 events taking place across the country. Since then, we've really seen Great Big Green Week flourish and grow. And last year, we saw 1.2 people taking part in Great Big Green Week, which is just an amazing feat. And yeah, just a huge celebration of that community action. This year, Great Big Green Week will take place between the 6th and the 14th of June, and we're going to see people coming together for good once more to show their support for a safer, greener future. And the reason why we're running this session this evening is that we know that many of the groups and communities that take part in Great Big Green Week need funding for your activities. And whilst we're unfortunately unable to provide a central pot of funding for these activities, we want to be able to support communities and organisers in other ways. So one of the ways is through sessions like this evening to give yourself a chance to hear from community groups and organisations who have secured funding for Great Big Green Week events and funders who have been able to award groups grants for Great Big Green Week activities, but also similar kind of community activities. And we know a lot of you will be thinking about Great Big Green Week events, but like I've mentioned, we hope that this evening is a chance for you to take on that guidance for specifically for Great Big Green Week opportunities, but also for general kind of community projects. So I am now going to hand over to our speakers. Just again, a reminder, if you have any questions throughout these presentations, please do pop them in the chat. And if you see any questions that you'd like answered as well, give it a thumbs up. We're going to be keeping an eye on the chat throughout. And then when we come back to the Q&A, we'll pick up on all those questions. So we're going to have all our speaker presentations first, and then we'll come back to a Q&A. So I'm firstly going to hand over to Helen and Louise. Helen works for Futureproof, which is a local charity in Cumbria, and has been involved with Great Big Green Week for a number of years. And Louise is the Community Development Officer at Westmoreland and Furness Council, and has worked very closely with Helen on providing funding for Great Big Green Week activities across Cumbria. So I am now going to hand over to Helen and Louise.
Thanks, Jazz. You're loading up our presentation. Great, we'll click on to the next one. Yeah, I'm starting and then I'll hand over to Louise as we go along. But yeah, I'm Helen. I work for, as Jazz said, a charity called Futureproof, which is part of a much wider partnership, the Zero Carbon Cumbria Partnership, which has been going for 5 years with support from the National Lottery Climate Action Fund. And we've been working across the county in that time to try and build momentum towards reaching net zero in Cumbria by 2037. So I came into post 5 years ago, and pretty much the first thing I did was organise a kind of range of different Great Big Green Week activities. So I recognised it was such a brilliant way of getting more people involved, getting more groups and individuals to take part in something fun and really help build that movement in support of climate and nature action. What we've been doing in Cumbria is slightly different perhaps to elsewhere, in that through the Zero Carbon Cumbria Partnership, we've been able to set up a scheme whereby we've been doing onward granting. So we've been able to provide funding and support for activities via micro grants of just £300. The idea of getting a whole programme of activities during Great Big Green Week. So I've been administering the process, but there's a grant steering group made up in part from members of the Sustainability Network. So members of grassroots groups working on climate and nature in Cumbria make the decisions. But the application process is as simple as it possibly can be, which means that very small community groups are able to get the resources they need in order to organise an event without it becoming a very cumbersome and time-consuming process. So I'd really recommend, if it's possible, to try and work with your local authority to set up something similar in your area. Next slide, please, Jazz. Just to give you an idea of what we were able to do last year with £5,000 worth of support from Westmoreland and Furness and some additional money from the lottery, we were able to support 23 different events, which was part of a much wider programme. I think we had something like 90 projects overall were running Great Big Green Week activities last year. But those funded through our programme were engaging, not attended by, engaging 9,816 people, but we know that an estimated 8,000 of those were people actually listening and taking part with Can Do Radio in Barrow. So the radio station itself was a really great way of helping to get the word out, and also working with young people from local schools on different programs around climate and nature. Anyway, the big win for me was the fact that 117 new volunteers were recruited as part of those events. And for me, that's absolutely vital that we continue to grow that pool of people who are able to contribute to the work and help raise awareness and get really involved in practical projects to help cut carbon. So yeah, as I say, we've been working with Louise and Westmoreland and Furness on this. So I don't know if you want to click onto the next slide, Jazz, and Louise can say more about the kind of context for the work.
Thanks, Helen. Yeah, so I'm Louise. I work as a community development officer with Westmoreland and Furness Council. It's a relatively new unitary authority formed in April 2023, and climate and nature features really highly in the priorities of the council, and we have a separate climate and nature team. So although I'm not with them, I work quite closely with them, and these are some of the things that in quite a short space of time that the council has already brought in various policies, strategies, etc. It kind of shows the high priority for this area. You want to move on, Jazz, please? So here's some of the climate action plans, nature strategies, etc. that have already been published. And as well as climate and nature being high priority for the council, as is community power and enabling local communities to take action. So an example of a recent project that's kind of linked that community action and the climate and nature is our 1 tree per resident ambition. And the last 2 weekends, we've been distributing trees to residents, parish councils, schools, various people who live locally who applied to plant trees in their garden or on their land. And we've managed to, the first aim was to plant 30,000, and we had so many applications, we've managed to give out 60,000. It's just one project of the 1 tree per resident. But obviously, Great Big Green Week equally ticks that community and climate box. And we have a community fund within the council that our community development team administers. And this is how we've managed to find the funding for the Great Big Green Week microgrants programme that we've run with Helen over the last 3-4 years. So yeah, a little bit more about some of that specifically. So back to Helen.
Next slide, please, Jazz. Yeah, just wanted to touch on some of the great range of activities that we've been able to support, from planting for pollinators, clothes swaps, sharing locally grown food, craft activities, green sketching, outdoor education, discussing sustainable transport visions, all kinds of things. And the hope is that these events will not only provide a bit of a win-win in terms of a lot of them addressing the climate, the cost of living crisis, as well as the climate crisis, saving people money, for example, through swap events, but also that the events will contribute towards kind of real behaviour change in the wider community and foster an environment whereby, you know, carbon footprint considerations become part of everyday thinking, are just part of the norm. So yeah, we've been able to reach out and enable a number of different disadvantaged groups to get involved as well, which I think is really important in terms of building a relationship with, you know, those groups and the kind of wonderful green and blue spaces that we have in Cumbria. So I've just got a few little case studies of the types of projects that we've supported. So next slide, please, Chaz. So, for example, Cumbria Clothing Collective is a new organisation, less than a year old. They used a swap event for Great Big Green Week as their kind of launch pad to get loads more volunteers involved. And they've just been successful in getting National Lottery Awards for All money through their environment programme. So, you know, really, really successful way of kickstarting more activity around fast fashion and so on in the county. Next slide, please, Jazz. And then, yeah, just another couple of examples. Sustainable Arnside, reckoned last year's events was one of the biggest events that Arnside had ever had in a village. So it involved everybody, from WI groups, youth groups, anything from gardening, sewing, lectures, friendships, fitness, relaxation, and sort of environment themed events. And also the Appleby Road, Friends of Appleby Road Community Garden had an open day in Great Big Green Week, and they were talking about how they've been able to link in with lots of families attending a forest school, which we funded, building links with Syrian and Afghani refugee families, and also linking in with the local special school to do all the catering for the event, which is a really good link up. And brings us on to the next slide, which is looking at partnership working. For me, that's absolutely vital. It's all about how you build partnerships and work with others. I think, Louise, you're going to say more about that.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, obviously, the partnership between Futureproof Cumbria and ourselves, we've got those shared values of working with community to benefit the climate. So it's worth people exploring their own local councils, whether it's a unitary authority or a county council, and just seeing what, have they got aims around supporting communities around climate and nature. Equally, have they got a community development team? It could be locality officers, could be neighbourhood teams that are there to support community organisations, whether it's run events or with projects. So get in touch. They're always, if you've got those teams, they're happy to help you. If there isn't a climate and nature ambition within your council, it doesn't mean to say that they wouldn't support that sort of project. They might have some community funding that could help with your event anyway. Equally, you might have town, parish, city councils. They might have some shared aims. They might have their own grant programmes. That's certainly the case in our town. The local town council also has an environment fund and an event fund. So you're looking for those shared values and aims. It could be equally a community development team. Even if they don't have funding, they might have other contacts, other links that they could support you with what you're aiming to do. We also, as a community development team, we find out about sort of larger scale projects that are taking place locally, and quite a lot of larger businesses. Or, for example, we've got some construction works taking place on the motorway. Well, that construction company has a social value fund. Whilst they're here working in the area for a couple of years, they want to input into local projects, and quite often community and environment are quite high up those scales. Just scanning my notes. So community development teams often have access to other funders. We have on our council website a national grant funder called IDOCS. And if you don't have a community development team locally, you may have a council for voluntary service, a CVS. So we have Cumbria CVS. They have access to the same grant funder. They have grant officers, funding officers. They have a really good idea of what funds might be out there, what the priorities are, when the closing dates are, what kind of groups are eligible. So they're a really good source of knowledge for groups that are wanting to run events and projects. Another sort of thought was that many funders quite like work with vulnerable or disadvantaged groups. So again, a community development officer or a CVS can probably help you link with those groups, with a special school or refugees or whatever that particular target group in your area might be. So forming those partnerships in order to, achieve your aims and gain the funding is a really positive way to go. And then some top tips from Helen.
Yeah, I think top tips are get stuck in and try your best. We have an expression in the north, shy bairns get nout, which basically means if you don't put your best effort in and try, you're not going to get anywhere in the first place. But yeah, my top tips would be to get a little group together to work on funding. Don't go off and do it all on your own, because not only is that going to be a lot of hard work, you need to bring your whole group with you. So you need sign off from your steering group or management committee before you submit your application, because you're applying as an organisation rather than an individual. The story behind the application is important. You really need to tell your story well and make sure it aligns with your funders' priorities. But when I'm looking at funding applications, I often go to the budget first, because that gives you a really good idea of the nuts and bolts of what people intend to spend the money on. So make sure that you've done your homework and made a really realistic estimate of what your activity will cost. So don't overinflate it, but also don't leave yourself short. So budgets are really, really key. You'll often see that there's a checklist for funders to ensure that you've provided all the key information that they need to go alongside the application. So make sure you have a look at that. Obviously, make sure you meet the deadline, but again, don't leave it all to the last minute. Make sure you're planning in advance, sharing the load with other people, and building in some deadlines in the run up to that final deadline to make sure you've done all your research in good time. Yeah, I think doing that admin-y stuff, what I find really useful when I'm applying for funding is having a master document, a Word document with all the information that you need about your organisation, about the project. So you can just cut and paste chunks of that into different application forms. And I also find it really helpful to get a critical friend to have a look at your draft and give you any feedback on that. Make sure your bids make sense and it doesn't have any glaring gaps in it. The other thing I'd say is, funding, getting a grant is a fab way of delivering your project. In some ways, it's an easy win if you've got somebody who's good at figures and good at writing, but it's not the only way of getting a small amount of cash. And if your main aim is to get your name out there and involve more people in supporting your activities, it might be an easier way to start by, organising crowdsourcing, having a bit of a whip round, or as Louise was saying, going to local businesses and see whether they'll just donate you a chunk of money without many strings attached. Because often when you're applying for grant funding, there are strings because it's public money, charitable money. You will have to account for that money. You will have to do monitoring reports. You will have to make sure you spend the money wisely on what you applied for. So, just bear that in mind, that there's more constraints if you're applying for grant funding. But yeah, it's definitely worth it because you're going to be able to develop and deliver a really brilliant event at the end of it. So go for it, is my advice.
Thanks both so much. Yeah, thank you for sharing your experience and some of your top tips there. If you have any questions for Helen or Louise, please do pop them in the chat. We're keeping an eye on those and collating them for the Q&A after. I'm now going to hand over to our next speaker. Oh, I'll share the slides after. I know there was a slide there with contact details for Helen and Louise, so you will have access to those after if you want to ask any more questions or get in touch with either of them. I'm now going to hand over to our next speaker, Biplav, who works for Haringey Council, and for the past 3 years has managed Haringey's Community Carbon Fund, which empowers residents and community groups to deliver local initiatives. So, Biplav, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you, Jazz. Hello, everyone. I'm Biplav Pagani from Haringey Council. I'm the Climate Change Officer. As Jazz said, I have been coordinating the Haringey Community Carbon Fund for the last 3 years. Currently, we are on year 5. We support community groups to deliver carbon reducing and climate positive projects across the borough. Through this fund, we have delivered a wide range of local climate actions, from solar panel installations to repair cafes that we talked about before, food growing projects, youth programs, community engagement activities. So we have seen firsthand what helps an application succeed. some challenges people usually face, and what makes community-led climate action really powerful. So today I'm going to share some practical tips on how to apply for a local authority community climate funding. Could be applicable for Haringey Community Carbon Fund, and also the principle is applicable for other local authority fundings as well. So slide 2. Let me just share some of the snapshot of the Haringey Community Carbon Fund. So over the first 4 years, Haringey Community Carbon Fund has supported 34 projects. We have delivered a number of carbon savings per year. There has been very strong emphasis on not just saving carbon, but also having different co-benefits, such as improved air quality, having upskilling green skills, and making the food supply chain more resilient, reducing energy bills, and also increasing community participation. And yeah, next slide. So as I said, I'll be covering what local authorities funding usually look like, some do's and don'ts while you are preparing or applying for a funding application, what will make applications stand out, and tips for first-time applicants, and also where to look for opportunities for funding. So next slide. Most council fundings run funding programs and are designed to support community-led climate or environmental projects. And there are ways how these projects are created. So the sources of funding is really important. For example, the Community Carbon Fund, it's sourced from carbon offset, the Section 106 funding. And these types of funding are usually ring-fenced, which means it's restricted on where we can use it. So a carbon offset funding should be used for carbon projects. So it is really important to kind of like check what are the sources of the funding, and if there are any restrictions. Usually these restrictions are communicated through the eligibility criteria. And we do the same with Haringey Community Carbon Fund. We do promote and prioritize tangible projects such as a solar panel installation or air source heat pump or building works. We don't discount awareness projects or behavioral change projects, but we do have to prioritize based on where the funding is coming from, which is the carbon offset funding. We do have different tiers of funding, and the approach might be similar to other local authorities as well. So we have micro grant, medium grant, and large grants. So small and early adopters or first-time applicants, they are usually aiming for micro grants. Medium grants are for constituted groups, and larger grants are for organizations with strong governance and delivery capacity. So it is really important to understand the size of the grant and also the requirements that it comes with. There are some common eligibility criteria that I mentioned for these types of different grants. So larger grants means you'll have a lot of things to prove, and it is better if you have more stakeholders involved in your project as well. Some expectations to see, and I'm going to cover some of these again in the next slide as well. So we'll be expecting a tangible impact, something that can be quantified. For example, in Community Carbon Fund, we want to see the actual carbon reduction. Sometimes measuring carbon is a bit difficult, so you can communicate that in terms of how much waste you have saved or how much energy you are saving. These numbers are really important because that helps us assess the application. Strong community engagement is always good, with clear plan and delivery mechanism. Also to understand most of the councils have a council strategy or climate action plan. If you have time going through that and seeing how your project aligns with that would also help with the application. And risk assessment and what are the mitigation measures. These are some of the expectations that we have. Moving into next slides, do's and don'ts. Some of them might be a repeat from the previous slide, but yeah, for do's, it's use SMART framework, which means be specific, make it measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And quantify impacts, as I mentioned before, outcomes, plans, wherever you can. The more specific you make it, the easier for us to identify, monitor, and accept the proposal. Make the delivery plan more realistic and have that timeline set. Again, identify risks and how you plan to mitigate it. This is really important. And provide evidence for costs partnership. If you have a joint venture or if you are partnering with another organization, have that memorandum of understanding or agreement with you on hand while you file in your application. And engage early with the council or the funder. It's really important. If you engage, it's easier for applicants to understand what the criteria are, what we are looking for. Also, something that I haven't added here is also look for previous funded projects. Like in Haringey Community Carbon Fund, we have funded 34 projects. So you could look at those projects and see what type of projects we have funded. We usually run a question and answer session right before the bid open, and we usually invite one of our previous grantees to come and talk. So there'll be like opportunities to engage, to talk with people who have already received the funding, and networking would also help you understand how to write the bid and what succeeds. Some don'ts are don't be vague or generic without a clear action plan, and don't underestimate project risks. There might be a lot of risks. For example, if it's general works or solar panel installation, you might need planning consent. You may not need planning consent. So it's really important that you identify that as a risk in terms of delivery on time. Don't make up cost and avoid unexplained contingency. Don't overpromise. Be ambitious, but also be realistic. And we recommend not to submit last minute. And yeah, next slide. What makes an application stand out? So yeah, just summarizing what we went through, quantified outcomes. So be sure that you are measuring either the carbon or the energy or the number of people you're engaging with, if it's an engagement project, and have that number laid out in your application form. That is really important. Strong community reach and co-benefits. Talk about all the co-benefits of the climate action project you are having. Talk about positives on the public health side of things, green skills, fuel poverty, and so on. Show if you have any partnerships. It's really important that you have diverse expertise in your source, in your application. Be innovative and have realistic ideas, and start early, engage early, obtain quotes and partnership and support letters wherever you need that. It's really important. That will make your application stand out. And most importantly, if you have identified any match funding, that is also really important. If you haven't, just think that this application could be your match funding for your another application. So it's always important that you start now. Next slide, please. So for first-time applicants, it is okay to start small. focus on the micro grants or feasibility grants to test your idea before you can scale up. Ask for help early. So as I mentioned, we do have teams or partners who offer guidance. For example, at Haringey, we collaborated with Haringey Community Collaborative and our VCS team as well. They provide a general bid writing advice or support. We don't expect everybody to be writing, good bids. Sometimes you have an idea and you cannot lay out that in writing. So it's really important you get support from voluntary community service and other teams. And I would like to also share one example of Haringey Fixers who received seed funding in year one. It was just £500 amount of money for a micro grant. And now they have opened a number of repair cafes across the borough. So just having that seed funding kind of like created a ripple effect of change, and they were able to scale up later on. So always be confident and apply for even micro grants. Don't worry about technical expertise. As a council, we are there and we always offer support on the technical side of things. Our application form does talk about putting carbon calculations, but we do understand not everybody are experts on carbon calculations. So we are always open to helping or providing guidance on how to do that calculation in order to complete your application form. And again, look at council's priorities, strategies, or action plans to understand what the council is actually having a gap in, and you could actually fill that gap through your project. Next slide, please. So where to look for funding? Obviously, the council website. Check the website, the climate and community website. If there is a funding opportunity, it will be published over there. If you're interested, you can also sign up for different newsletter or community networks. For example, in Haringey, we have the Haringey Climate Partnership, where we engage with the community and shape different strategies, programs, and projects in the borough. Also look for other funding sources. In England, you will have Community Energy England. In London, in North London, you have North London Waste Authority. They also provide different grants. There's lottery funding. There is energy charities. There are lots of funding depending on your capacity and how long your organization has constituted for. Contact climate and parks team at councils. Those are your key individual to be contacting. Again, speak to successful project teams. So look at the website, check which project have been granted and try to access. And if not, if you don't have contact details of them, you could again ask the council officers if there is any mechanism to contact them and learn from them. In Haringey, we do have that mechanism. Obviously talk with local councillors. They are the champion for community-led initiatives. So check who is your councillors holding the portfolio of climate or holding the portfolio of community, and have a conversation with them and see if you can shape some projects for your council. And yeah, there are many other community groups. Don't be in silos, talk, network, and see what worked. Even if you're a first-time applicant, you could partner with a different organization and have a consortium of different expertise and apply for a medium or a large grant as well. Joint bidding, sponsorship, mentorship is really important. Last slide. Yeah, I think that's the last slide. So yeah, just wanted to summarize, strong applications are the one which are like really clear, which has quantified numbers, figures, who have engaged early with the council and who has evidence of what has been put in the application form, whether it's a sponsorship, whether it's a partnership, whether it's getting a planning consent, or whether it's the quotes for the works you are applying for. So having that on hand is really important. And yeah, thank you, and happy to have any questions.
Thanks so much, Biplav. Yeah, as I've mentioned, if you have any questions, please do put them in the chat. I know I can see a few coming through, and we're making note of those. So any other things that come to mind, please do put them in the chat. But yeah, that was super useful. I'm now going to hand over to our final speaker, Chloe, who works for Royal Botanical Gardens at Kew in their Grow Wild programme. And through their Grow Wild programme, they provide a number of different grants, both for their community programme and youth grants. So Chloe's going to speak to yeah, some examples of those and share her top tips and guidance as well. So over to you, Chloe.
Thank you, Jazz. I'm just going to try and share my screen.
You should be able to now. Sorry, I was still sharing mine.
That's all right.
Yeah, that's up.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, hello everyone. I'm Chloe. I'm the Grow Wild Engagement Officer at the Royal Botanic Gardens Kew. So I'll start with a little bit of an introduction into who we are and what some of our programs are, and then give some guidance on applying for funding as best as I can from the experience of Grow Wild. So Grow Wild is the national outreach programme of Kew. We work with communities across the UK to inspire people to grow together, learn about nature and give back through volunteering. And our work specifically focuses on UK native plants and fungi, which are vital support for our wildlife and pollinators, but sadly in decline. So as part of our work, we have two national grant programmes. One supports community groups and one supports youth-led projects. So I'll talk about these two programmes on the upcoming slides. But here is a map of the project locations that we awarded grants to in 2025. So just so you can see kind of spread across the UK. And in 2025, we also ran Grow Wild on the Railway, which was another grant programme for youth-led projects, and that was at stations across South East England. So firstly, just a little bit about our community programme grant opportunity. So this offers £2,000 grants and support to constituted community groups and non-profit organisations to transform an urban space to benefit people in biodiversity. So successful applicants also get a follow-on grant of £500 the year after they're successful, and that's to support sort of ongoing activities. And the programme also involves online knowledge sharing sessions, so we like to bring groups together to kind of share their experiences and learnings from the projects that they're delivering as part of the grant programme. So the application for this is a little bit different maybe to other applications because we ask for a video application of 3 minutes or maximum 3 minutes. And this is primarily because it really helps us to see the space that the groups are wanting to transform. And then applicants will create their video and then upload a link to the video on an online application form. And we also ask them to fill in a budget and a safeguarding policy and procedures to be uploaded. So applications to this opportunity are actually open at the moment, but they close next week on the 4th of Feb. So I don't imagine if this could suit some of you, you might not have time to apply, but it will be running again next year as well. And we offer 20 grants each year. Our second grant programme is our youth grants. So this is for young people aged 16 to 25, and projects can be anything that champion UK native plants and fungi and also engage the wider community. But the brief for this is really open. So we have an amazing range of projects from wildflower maps to fungi sculptures and wonderful creative things. So the young person will apply with a supporting organisation. That might be a community group or a school or a university, and they support the young person to deliver their project, and they'd also hold the grant money for them. So like for the community programme, we ask for, well, we have online sessions again, so where young people can kind of share knowledge, learn from experts at Q and things like that. And young people also can receive the Q Young Environmental Leader Award as part of their project, and that helps deliver kind of develop their leadership skills as well. And similarly, we ask for a 2-minute video application and safeguarding as well. And then again, that's applied through an online form. So perhaps some of your organisations could support young people to apply through this for this kind of grant opportunity. Applications will open in mid-Feb and close mid-March. So if you know any young people aged 16 to 25, do send it their way. I can share the links to these opportunities in the chat later, maybe. So I can only speak really for the experiences we've had from our Grow Up grant programmes, but I thought I would just share some general tips and things to consider before applying for a grant. So firstly, the most key thing for a successful application for us is to pay really careful attention to the eligibility criteria. So this means not only checking like are you the type of organisation that the funder is looking for, but also make sure that the funder's aims and objectives align really well with your project. So different funders might have different focuses. So just thinking carefully about what do you really want to raise money for, and make sure that this grant opportunity is right for what you really want. For example, funders will fund different things. So Grow Wild will fund staff time as part of a project, but not all funders will do that. So just looking at what you really need to be able to deliver the project. And also if you're applying to do a new piece of activity that kind of fits the funder's aims, make sure that that is really feasible for your group and also kind of suits your core aims for your group. And then think about what you need in place to secure that grant. So you might need more staff or volunteers, for example, to actually be able to carry out that project, and things to consider, like if you are scaling up for a larger pot of money funding, whether you might then become grant dependent and challenges that might come with that. It's also a good idea to check what funders expect of grant recipients in terms of reporting and record keeping and things like that. Some ask more than others, and just making sure that you'll have the time and the resources to meet those requirements before you think about applying. And also just think about how realistic it is for you to spend the money within the time frame. So for example, our grant periods run from April to October, so groups would need to carry out their activities and spend the budget in that time, and some funders have shorter and longer periods. So when you do come to apply, just and I try not to repeat too much of what's already been said here, but take your time to read the guidance and put aside the hours, because it can take a long time. And as has been mentioned, lots of funders require groups to have certain policies and procedures in place. So, for example, we ask for a safeguarding policy I mentioned. We also require groups to have their own bank account and things like that. So make sure that you have these in place as early on before you kind of start looking for grant opportunities, just so that if a grant opportunity comes up, you won't be sort of scrambling to create them. If you are applying to a grant, speak to the funder if you can. If you're unsure whether your project is right for the grant, lots of funders have advisors or contacts that you can call to speak to. And it also might be helpful to look at kind of past projects from that funder to give an idea of the scope of different projects. It's not always relevant, but for our grant programs, we'd recommend this. We have lots of stories of projects we funded before. And also maybe a bit specific to our grant programs, but we like to say don't be put off because you don't feel like you're an expert in a certain project that you want to do. We're always happy to receive applications from a community group, for example, that is new to growing or something like that, or a young person trying a new skill. But yeah, having a kind of support network or reaching out to other local groups to support you with things is also a good idea. Yeah, so as has been mentioned, other groups can kind of help sharing with the knowledge, or maybe other groups have recently applied and been successful with funding, and you can get tips from them as well. This is more of kind of a general recommendation, but we always say, do always record your impact in your story, even if you're not in a grant period, but you maybe want to apply with someone in the future and you're just doing your regular activity, even if you think it's not loads of activity, just always take photos, write down volunteer hours, things like that, so that when you do then come to apply for a grant, you've got a story to tell. So here's a quote from Global Gardens Project in Cardiff, who were on our community programme. And the group had to put the case forward to the council about why they should keep their land. And recording their volunteer testimonials and volunteer hours helped them keep that land. And then they went on to receive National Lottery funding as well to continue their regular volunteer sessions. So it's always worth noting down evidence of your impact and being able to share it. So I should say our grant programs are, in the last years, have always been oversubscribed, and I imagine that's true of lots of funding. So here are just some very simple tips from our team about what might give a project the best chance. So firstly, as I've already mentioned, say how you'll meet the eligibility and project criteria, and don't assume funders will sort of read between the lines. So really spell it out exactly how you hit each criteria. Also, it's okay for a project plan to be ambitious, but make sure it is also realistic. So your funders trust that that is a project that will be delivered. And of course, you're all amazing, passionate people. So just let that enthusiasm shine through where you can. And I just thought I'd share this nice example of a project we funded through our community programme. And they actually applied to do a Great Big Green Week event. So they brought lots of people together for a Wildflowers for Wellbeing event during Great Big Green Week, sharing the message of why we need more wild spaces. And they had wildflower planting and creative wildflower workshops. They had a really clear plan that fit all the grant criteria, and it was a lovely project. And that was this year, no, 2025 that was. So that kind of small project that they did during Great Big Green Week led to them to doing lots more projects to develop more wildlife habitats in their local park and things like that. So I just thought that's a nice connection to Great Big Green Week as well. So just quickly to share our new resource in case it's helpful for some of you. This is the Grow Wild Guide, and it shares sort of everything we've learned about setting up and running community growing projects. And there's some advice about funding in there too. So it's shaped by the first-hand experiences of over 400 community projects we've supported across the UK, alongside advice from science and horticulture professionals at Kew and beyond Kew as well. So you can download this for free on our website, which I can also put in the chat. But yeah, just in case it might be of interest to any of you wanting to start community growing projects. And I'll leave you with these words from Polly, who is the Grow Wild and Youth Programme Manager at Kew. Fundraising can seem like learning a new language, but it gets easier with practice. Have a clear vision of what you want to do and why it's needed, and let your passion come through. Good luck. And this is our details, but yeah, I can put some links in the chat, and do get in touch if you have any questions, and I'll be here for the Q&A as well.
I have noted down a couple of questions from before, so I'm gonna whiz through those. But Mary, if any new ones come up in the chat, I'll come to you after. So one that I want to start off with was a question around advice. It was a question from Kira, and it was advice on, if you're not affiliated with a specific group or organization, but you want to get started on hosting events in your local area, for example, for Great Big Green Week, where do you start? Assuming that's in terms of kind of fundraising and acquiring funds. Helen, you mentioned you had a couple of thoughts on this. So if I hand over to you first, and then if any of our speakers want to jump in after, please do.
Thanks, Jazz. I think Biplav and Chloe actually mentioned some of the tactics in their spiels as well. But yeah, my take on this is that Great Big Green Week is that ideal opportunity to kickstart something new. So yeah, it does feel as if, I mean, definitely having a bank account can be a real stumbling block, can't it? It can be really, really difficult for established groups to get a bank account, let alone newly forming groups. But also that whole thing about governance, having a proper constitution and so on, can feel like a barrier. I was just going to put in the chat, that there is some government guidance there for a small charity constitution. So if you're a brand new organisation with a turnover of less than £5,000, you can use that as a template to get started. But I think Great Big Green Week offers you the step even before that to link in with other organisations. Certainly, we've had plenty of examples where individuals or small groups of people have, wanted to organise something but didn't have a bank account and didn't have any kind of constitution. So what they did was then link in with another group. And I think the Climate Coalition is a great starting point for that, because you've got lots of affiliates already, haven't you, at a national level? So likes of WI, for example, are parts of the Climate Coalition. So I'd be looking at who else is there you can partner up with. Perhaps we've had parish councils locally offering that kind of incubation for new groups setting up. We've had sister organisations, for example, Green Screen project. Local individual wanted to get climate film shown at the local cinema. So they linked in with an arts organisation that had access to bank account and so on, to help them with that first step. But yeah, I mean, like Biplaf was saying, we've seen projects where it's been a discussion event. So I can think of one down in Grange where it was a Let's Talk Waste event, which was hosted at a Methodist church premises. And that then became the incubator for a repair cafe, where they were able to mobilize volunteers and quickly became a self-sufficient entity where they were kind of raising money through the refreshments they were selling to keep going as a completely funding free going concern for the community, which I think is a brilliant opportunity for Great Big Green Week events to kickstart something like that. So don't let it put you off. Do have a think about who else there is in your local community that you could work with, and for that very first event. But I think one of the opportunities you can do as part of Great Green Week is put it out there as well. We want this to be the inaugural event for a new group. Come along if you're interested. Find out more. Here's a speaker. Here's a film that can prompt conversation and get that discussion going as to what your local community needs and what you'd like to do for the future. And if you then have some way of obviously a sort of sign-in sheet or something like that, all those GDPR concerns thought through and disclaimers written up and all the rest of it, but get hold of the kind of contact numbers and emails for those people who might be prepared to be part of a new group with you, and then make sure you've got a next step lined up for after your Great Big Green Week event to bring people together to really start mobilizing and building something new. So yeah, it is a little bit daunting, Kira, but I would say we need leaders, we need people to step up from their community and show the way. And we also know that there's sort of research out there that says that people think that other people around in their community aren't as concerned about climate as they are. So there will be people out there who are wanting to do more but don't have an opportunity. So if you're brave enough, step up and create that opportunity. That's what I'd say.
Thank you so much, Helen. I think that was, all really great advice. And just to follow on, we are in the process of kind of bringing out all of our support resources for Great Big Green Week, but there's lots of kind of guides, and we'll have other trainings later on in the year, linking to what Helen said, around how to map your community and reach out to other people and groups and organizations, and how you can think about who else can I get in touch with, not just on the funding side of things, but getting that momentum going. So yeah, thank you for that, Helen. Just opening up to the rest of the panel to answer that question if you've got any other thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, echoing Helen's words really, 'cause that was lovely. But I was just thinking as well on the banking note, I came across today the UK Finance website have a new guide that's for voluntary organisations, and it goes through all the different options for like bank accounts that you can open if you're a community group, and it tells you kind of which banks have different options and things like that. So that might be helpful if your group was at a stage where you did want to open a bank account. I can pop the link in the chat. And yeah, that was it. But otherwise, yeah, I think really good to kind of link with other groups where you can.
Thanks, Chloe. Yeah, if you're able to share that link, and then I can share it in the follow-up email as well. So if you aren't able to catch it from the chat, don't worry, we can share it in the follow-up email after. Thanks, everyone. The next question, we had a couple of things popping up in the chat around match funding. So I wondered if the panel were able to answer kind of just some general guidance on like what can be used as match funding. And there was a specific question around kind of what's a reasonable amount to use for kind of volunteer hours. So Biplav, I know you mentioned a bit about match funding. I wondered if you could kick us off just with kind of just generally kind of maybe introducing what is match funding, and then just a bit of information on that.
Okay, I can give an example of a solar PV project. For example, you have a 5 kilowatt solar PV, and what you can do is like if you have a bigger roof space, you could be like, I can put a 15 kilowatt solar project, 5, 5, and 5. For 5, I'm applying to your grant, and for the next 2 modules, I'm going to apply for these other grants that are available or that we have identified. Sometimes what happens is you can apply for these funding simultaneously, so you could present different evidence, like if you have already done the application, for example. Sometimes you are shortlisted, so these kind of information kind of like helps you provide evidence that you do have match funding, or either you have, if you have identified it, or if you have applied for it, or if you are in a process of maybe receiving it. This kind of like adds into the weight to your application. But this is not a criteria for getting funding. We don't discount applications which do not have any match funding. This will just give an additional weight to it. In terms of what could be included in match funding, we don't really have a guidance on what could be included, what not. I have seen some organizations putting their staff time as match funding as well, while we don't really fund staff cost because we want to spend a maximum amount of funding on capital element of the project. Therefore, organizations put their staff time as match funding. That could be one method to also add into match funding. Some people, as mentioned before, have identified few other sources of funding, and they have pledged that they would be applying for those funding. And if this application is successful, this application will actually become like a match funding for the other 2 applications. So that is also one example that I can share. Yeah, I think that's it for now.
Thank you so much. Any of the other kind of panelists have any guidance on match funding?
I could just mention in-kind support. So that could be another type of match funding, would be in-kind support. So if volunteers, and somebody just put what's the hourly rate for hours, it depends. We sometimes sort of say between £15 and £20 an hour, depending on what that person is doing. If So you can calculate the amount of voluntary time, which would be an in-kind support. Or if you need flyers for a particular event, then and a local business is providing those, that can be costed in. Although you're getting them for free, that could be costed in as in-kind support. If the building that you need for a particular workshop or event is being provided for free, again, you can cost that in, and that will be a match funding. So it doesn't actually need to be another grant fund. It can be calculated in other ways.
Thanks so much, Louise.
Okay.
We have another question here from Amy, asking what kind of incorporation is most useful for applying for funding. Is it kind of CIC or is there something else? And what are the options for informal community groups? I think we've kind of touched on those a little bit, and the link in the chat that Chloe is going to share, I think will be useful. But yeah, just any additional thoughts or responses to that question.
Well, that's another one that the likes of CBS or BAS as you've got in Haringey, those we call them infrastructure bodies. It's a strange name, isn't it? But those those groups that are charities themselves that are set up to support other community groups and charities can advise on what the best governance is for your project. So CICs, community interest companies, are slightly different from charities in that the directors of CICs can be paid, whereas if you're a charitable group, you're the directors or management committee don't get paid normally. So that's a one sort of key difference. But I'll probably be able to tell you about community renewable energy projects. The community benefit societies where the kind of shares from the community energy is shared across the membership of that group. That's another form. So it can get a bit complicated. My advice, that we mentioned earlier, is if you're a small group, keep it simple. It doesn't have to be complicated until you've got big grants coming through your bank account. But as you grow, that there are organisations out there and tons of information on the internet to help you make decisions about the best format for your group.
Thanks, Helen. And yeah, we can pull together some of those websites and point people in the right direction to guidance on this, if it is something that is going to be useful. So yeah, we can pull that together. And for all the speakers this evening, if there's anything that you've come across that would be helpful for attendees to know, please send it my way. And similarly, if you're on the training this evening and you've got some information that you want to share, please do send it my way as well. Debbie, I can see you've got a hand raised. I'm just gonna, I think you'll be able to unmute now.
Yeah, can I just share how not to do it? Because
Yeah,
that might be helpful. 2 years ago, I set up a CIC on my own, with advice at the time from a local I'm just going to say from another local organisation that probably shouldn't really be giving me business advice. And they said, well, do the paperwork, get the admin in place, and then you can get the directors. That is not the way to do it, because if you haven't got your group around you at the start, you are not going to find them 6 months or a year or 2 years down the line. I'm just about to close it now, which is really sad. And I've struggled on my own and I've had people come and go, but that is how not to do it. So I just wanted to add that in because I think it's important. If you've got your group, like Helen said, it doesn't have to be complicated. Get your group, go down the path, and then those doors will open and things will start to become clear. There's so many ways you can go about this. I'm part of the Climate Commission now, and we're looking at becoming governance and organisation and all that. And we were advised, well, keep in mind that you might want to have a membership, because that's a different route to go down. So there's so many options. So if Jazz can put some ideas up, but really keep it simple, that would be my suggestion. I wish I had in the beginning, because I think I'd be in a different place now. But anyway, just wanted to share that so that other people can kind of, not make the mistakes that I did.
Thank you so much, Debbie. Yeah, sorry to hear that you're having to close down your initiative, but yeah, good luck with future endeavors, and thank you so much for sharing that guidance and advice. I think we're coming to the end of the Q&A now. There have been specific questions about kind of specific projects, some for Great Big Green Week, some more specific. So I'm going to follow up on those via email, just so I can find out a bit more about what would be useful and what kind of things you'd be looking for, and potentially point you in the right direction, because some are really related to kind of Great Big Green Week ideas. So if you have asked a question about kind of specific projects or activities, don't worry, I will be following up with you. Mary, I just wanted to check if there were any other kind of more general questions in the chat that have come through. No, nothing. Okay. Great. Well, in that case, I'll wrap up the Q&A here. If you do have any questions that come to mind after the session, please do just feel free to drop me an email. We're nearly at the end, but I just wanted to say thank you so much to all of our speakers for coming along this evening and sharing their guidance and examples. It's been really great to hear some of the kind of successful applications, and also the kind of range of funding opportunities and how you can go about things, and keeping it simple, start small. And I think for kind of, especially for Great Big Green Week activities, and those using it as like a jumping off point, I think there's been some really great guidance shared here this evening. So thank you so much to all of our speakers this evening. I am just going to share a few more slides on kind of some additional support that we are going to provide at the Climate Coalition for getting involved in Great Big Green Week, but also for kind of general guidance on where you can find funding opportunities and things like that. So we are just signing off on our fundraising resource for this year for Great Big Green Week. And again, there's lots of different information on kind of the different funding avenues, whether that's crowdsourcing or setting up a fundraising event, or looking at, bigger trusts and foundations and grants. That information a lot of that is covered in our fundraising guide. But what we're also going to be doing is highlighting kind of ongoing and more specific funding opportunities, on the Great Big Green Week website. So we're going to look to update this quite regularly, hopefully once a month. So if you are just kind of thinking what's out there, where can I start? We will have a funding page on the Great Big Green Week website, sharing links to opportunities such as, the Grow Wild grants, youth grants program, and other things that are available. We also, as I mentioned, have a whole load of resources and training opportunities coming up in the next couple of months to give you guidance on other aspects of Great Big Green Week. So there'll be training sessions on how to organise an event, how to reach out to your community, how to get media coverage in the run-up to and after Great Big Green Week, how to engage your local politicians, how to promote your events, lots of different sessions and resources. So they're coming in the next couple of months. But also, if you have any general questions about your Great Big Green Week projects or finding funding for things, please do just get in touch. My email is going to be in the follow-up email and on the slides. So please do always feel free to reach out if you need any additional guidance. So after this session, we'll share a recording. We'll share the slides and any useful links to resources, funding opportunities, things that have been mentioned throughout the session. So don't worry about scrambling around and collecting all of them, because we'll have them all in one place for you. Please do sign up to our community and Great Big Green Week newsletters if you haven't already. We'll be sending out regular emails with kind of further training opportunities, new resources, funding opportunities, community stories, all that good stuff. So again, I'll put a link to where you can sign up to our newsletters if you haven't already in the follow-up email. And lastly, yeah, please just take the time to fill out the evaluation poll at the end there if you do have time. If not, again, we'll be repeating the questions in our follow-up email, so you can share your thoughts and feedback that way. But yeah, just to say another thank you for coming along this evening. Thank you to Chloe, Louise, Helen, and Biplav for your time this evening and sharing your guidance and putting together those brilliant presentations for people to take away with them. And good luck with all your funding applications, with getting involved in Great Big Green Week. I can't wait to see all the amazing activity that's put on during the week.